Greetings children, this is the second part of explanation of your lesson, Going Places. In the first part, we discussed the dialogues between Jansi and Sophie while they were coming back from their school. Now, Sophie, the protagonist of the story, reached her house and the scene 2. If ever I come into money, I will buy a boutique. This is a dialogue said by Sophie. If she ever got enough money, she wanted to buy a boutique. She expressed her wish, her fantasy in her house. If you ever come into money, you will buy us a blessed decent house to live in. Thank you very much. This is an agitated or angered retort from her father. Sophie's father was scooping shepherd's pie into his mouth as hard as he could go. He was eating shepherd's pie, scooping it from the large quantity and putting it into his mouth. This picture will tell you what is a shepherd's pie and what is scooping. And hard as he could go, his plump face, plump means fatty, fatty face, still grimy. Grimy means that soily, because he was a day laborer and he just came back from his day labor and he was sweat, marked from the day. Marked from the day means he was just came back from his work. So he was eating shepherd's pie. Look at the next paragraph. She thinks money grows on trees, don't she, Dad? Said little Derek, hanging on the back of his father's chair. Another character is introduced here, that is little Derek. Who is this little Derek? He is the younger brother of Sophie and he is also presented as a foil to Sophie's character because he thinks here very practically. And his comments, look at his comments. She thinks money grows on trees. Don't she, Dad? So one-side characters are presented purely practical and rational. Sophie, the protagonist, on the other hand, a character with a lot of fantasies. And he was hanging back of his father's chair and taking that shepherd's pie in between their mother's side. Another character is introduced here. Their mother, Sophie's and Derek's mother, is introduced. She was witnessing all these and she expressed her discontent through a sigh. That sigh contained everything, what was going on there and her dislike he expressed here. Sophie watched her back, stooped over the sink and wondered at the incongruity of the delicate bow which fastened her apron strings. Then the object that attracted Sophie was her mother. She was stooping over the sink and washing certain dishes. And the thing that attracted her was the bow, the delicate bow, the fine structured, the good, beautiful bow that made with the apron strings on her back. That attracted Sophie's attention. The delicate seeming bow and the crooked back. So here a contrastive picture is presented. The delicate seeming bow and the crooked back of Sophie's mother. So here the writer A.R. Barton introduced a literary device of subjective correlative. Here the delicate seeming bow represents the beautiful dreams, the fascinating dreams of Sophie. She wants to start a boutique or an actress or a fashion designer, whatever it is, her dreams, that represents this delicate seeming bow. And the reality is like the crooked back. So here also we can see the conflict between subjective reality and the objective reality. The subjective reality of Sophie is different from her objective reality. So the writer very well presented here the literary device of objective correlative. The evening had already blackened in the windows, and the small room was steamy from the stove and cluttered with the heavy breathing man in his vest at the table and the dirty washing piled up in the corner. Later, the writer gave us a clear picture of their household. The evening had already blackened in the windows and the small room was steamy. The small room in which these people were sitting filled with smoke and steam and cluttered means untidy with all the things. And this heavy breathing man, Sophie's father, in his vest, he only wore a vest at the table and the dirty washing piled up in the corner. At one corner of the room, you could also see the piled up unwashed clothes. Sophie felt a tightening in her throat. The reason for the tightening of her throat was she couldn't correlate her dreams with the reality. The subjective reality conflicts with the objective reality. That's why she felt that tightening in her throat. She went to look her brother Geoff. So she went away from there to look at her brother Geoff. So another character is introduced here. So we come across almost all people in Sophie's house. Her father, her little young brother, and her mother, and now her elder brother Geoff. He was kneeling on the floor of the next room, tinkering with a part of his motorcycle over some newspaper spread on the carpet. And this Geoff, Sophie's elder brother, he was sitting in the next room tinkering means repairing, with a part of his motorcycle over some newspaper spread on the carpet. He was 3 years out of school, an apprentice mechanic. And this Geoff was out of school for the last 3 years, and now he was doing the work of an apprentice mechanic and traveling to his work each day to the far side of the city. Every day he went the far side of the city to attend his work. He was almost grown up now. Look at this sentence. He was almost grown up now, which means that he is compared with Sophie. Sophie is not, and he has. He was almost grown up, and she suspected areas of his life about which she knew nothing. Some areas of his life Sophie had no idea. So she started thinking about that areas of his life about which he never spoke, and he had never spoke to her about the other side of his life. He said little at all, ever voluntarily. And this Geoff had the character of he never speak voluntarily with people. And words had to be prized out to him like the stones out of the ground. Look at the expression here. Words had to be prized out. It is very expensive thing to take words from Geoff. So words had to be prized out to him like the stones out of the ground. What hardship we have to give to take out the stones from the ground. Such difficulty is there to make him speak something. And she was jealous of his silence. Actually, this Sophie, she is always jealous of the silence of her brother Geoff. When he wasn't speaking, it was as though he was away somewhere. When he was not speaking or conversing with anybody, it seemed that he was in another world indulging in. Out there in the world, in those places he had never been. It seemed that he had been in a world that she had ever been there. Whether they were only the outlying districts, Come to the next page. Of the city or places beyond in the surrounding country who knew where he was living when he didn't speak anything. She did not know anything about it, but she wanted to know all these things. They attained a special fascination simply because they were unknown to her and remained out of her reach. And those places where Job went every day, she had a special fascination simply because she had never seen those places. And those places remained out of her reach. Perhaps there were also people, exotic, interesting people of whom he never spoke. This was Sophie's idea. There would also be people and interesting and exotic people and with whom he never would speak. It was possible, though he was quiet and didn't make new friends easily. And it is his nature, he never make a friendship with anybody quickly. She longed to know them. But Sophie wanted to know such people. She wished she could be admitted more deeply into her brother's affection and that someday he might take her with him. And her wish was that her brother would treat her a little more affectionately, which means that he already treated her affectionately, but she wanted a little more affection from her brother. If so, he would take her one day to his workplace, though their father forbade it and Job had never expressed an opinion. That she had expressed several times, but their father denied it, and Job never expressed his mind to her. She knew he thought her too young, and he considered her as too young to take to his workplace, and she was impatient. But she remained impatient. She was conscious of a vast world out there waiting for her, and she knew instinctively that she would feel at home there as in the city, which had always been her home. Her feeling is like this. The city people would treat her like the people in her own house because she had born and brought up in the city. The city had been her house till now. She was very conscious about the outer world, and she thought that they were anxiously waiting for her arrival, and she knew instinctively that she would feel as at home as there as in the city, which had always been her home. And she simply thought that she would feel as at home when she went out in the mid of the city. It expectantly awaited her arrival. She thought that the entire city people were expectantly waiting for her arrival. Expectantly means with expectation. They were waiting for the arrival of Sophie. She knew herself riding there behind the Job. So this is another dream of this Sophie. She saw in her dream that she was riding behind Job's bike. He wore new shiny black leathers, and he was in a very wonderful dress of shining black leathers, and she a yellow dress, and she was wearing an yellow dress with a kind of cape that flew out behind. As she was sitting as a pillion rider of the bike, her cape that flew in the air. All this she saw in her dream. There was the sound of applause as the world rose to greet them. As she reached at the place where he was working, the people would rise up and clapped their hands to receive her. This is her imagination about the outside world. Now come to the reality. He sat frowning at the oily component he cradled in his hands as though it were a small dumb animal and he was willing it to speak. When she reached at his room, he was repairing the oily component of his motor bike. He sat frowning at the oily component that he cradled in his hands. Cradled here means he kept in his hands as though it were a small dumb animal. And his treatment with the oily component part of the motorbike, something like a dumb animal. And he was willing to speak. He was trying to make the oily component part of the motorbike to speak. I met Danica, says Sophie said. Then she started the conversation with her brother Geoff by saying that she met Danica. He looked around abruptly. Where? When he heard the name Danica, he looked around and asked, where? In the arcade, funnily enough. Then she said she met Danica at the arcade at the shopping complex. Funnily enough, it was a wonderful experience, she said. It's never true. The first reply from Geoff was, it's never true. It shows that it is not the first time she is trying to say something untruthful to him. That's why he remarked it as, it's never true. I did too. Then she confirmed him by saying that she did too, which means that she saw him. You told her dad? Did you tell this to our dad? She shook her head. Shook means she said no. Her head. Chastened at his unawareness that he was always the first to share her secrets. So she felt that chastened feeling. Chastened means feeling that difficult experience. Chastened at his unawareness. He was not aware of the fact that if anything she had to share, the first person she would share all her secrets was this Geoff, that he couldn't recognize. Because of this, she felt chastened. She chastened. I don't believe it. Even after her confirmation, said he didn't believe in it. There, I was looking at the clothes in Royce's window. I was just standing in front of Royce's window, looking at the displayed clothes there in the window, when someone came and stood beside me. It was at this moment, it was at this stage somebody came and stood beside her, she said, and she turned and looked around. And who should it be but Danica? When she turned and looked, she realized that it was none other than the famous Irish football prodigy, Danica. She was thrilled. She was excited, she said to her brother. All right, what does he look like? Okay, I believed what you said. Tell me, how does he look like? Oh, come on, you know what he looks like. What a silly question you are asking. You know him because we several times went to see the football matches and we have seen him in the televisions. What a question. You know what he looks like? Close to, I mean not seeing by in the television or in the ground. Close to looking. That's what I want to know. Well, he has green eyes, gentle eyes. He is not so tall as you would think. Then she started giving details of his look. Like he had green eyes, gentle eyes, and he was not tall as he would think. She wondered if she should say about his teeth, but decided against it. Then she was hesitant to speak about the details of his teeth also, but she put away from that. But she decided against it. This is the second part or second scene of the story Going Places. The next part of explanation you will get in part 3 of Going Places. This is the end of the second part. Thank you for watching till the end.